Israeli drones and shelling stir deep trauma in Gaza despite ceasefire. Trump, Japan's Takaichi sign landmark deal to secure rare earth supply chains. Hurricane Melissa threatens Jamaica as storm of the century nears landfall. The jubilant crowd celebrates Ouattara's landslide re-election in Ivory Coast. Good afternoon. Welcome to The World in 30 Minutes on Politics and Business Television. I'm Fatima Abubakar Oyibo. Many thanks for joining us. Details of these news stories and more content to come after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in full. Despite an active ceasefire agreement, Israeli drone surveillance and intermittent shelling continue to rattle communities across Gaza, triggering widespread psychological distress. Residents in Khan Yunis and other southern areas report living under constant fear, with the persistent hum of drones, locally dubbed Al-Zanana, serving as a haunting reminder of past violence. Human rights groups say the psychological toll is mounting, especially among the children and the elderly, as a threat of renewed conflict looms despite diplomatic efforts. Recent reports confirm at least 2 fatalities from an Israeli strike near Khan Yunis, further fueling anxiety and calls for accountability. Experts warn that the ongoing aerial presence and sporadic shelling amount to psychological warfare, undermining the spirit of the truce and deepening trauma in already devastated communities. International observers are urging stricter enforcement of ceasefire terms and expanded mental health support as humanitarian organizations brace for a surge in trauma-related disorders across the region. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has ruled out running for vice president in the 2028 election, calling the idea too cute and not right, despite some supporters floating the strategy as a workaround to the constitutional 2-term limit. Speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump said he would be allowed to run as VP but dismissed the notion, adding he thinks the people wouldn't like that. However, Trump reignited speculation about his political future by stating he would love to serve a 3rd term, even though the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution bars anyone from being elected president more than twice. He has repeatedly joked about extending his time in office, teasing supporters with Trump 2028 hats and rally remarks. While most legal scholars reject the possibility of a 3rd term, some allies reportedly continue exploring unconventional pathways to keep Trump in power beyond 2029. U.S. President Donald Trump and Japan's Prime Minister Sani Takaichi have signed a major agreement aimed at securing supply of rare earths and critical minerals, marking a strategic move to reduce reliance on China. The deal was formalized during Trump's visit to Tokyo, where both leaders pledged to deepen economic and security ties. Takaichi, Japan's first female prime minister, hailed the agreement as the beginning of a new golden age in bilateral relations, emphasizing its importance for defense technologies, electric vehicles, and clean energy systems. The framework pact includes coordinated investment, fair market practices, and joint development of diversified supply chains. It also complements a broader $550 billion economic package involving U.S. investments in Japan, shipbuilding, agriculture, and energy. Trump praised Takaichi's leadership and reaffirmed America's commitment to supporting Japan's military buildup and rising tensions in the Indo-Pacific. The rare earth deal is seen as a cornerstone of the evolving U.S.-Japan alliance, with both nations positioning themselves to counter China's dominance in critical mineral exports. Well, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has officially filed an appeal against his 27-year prison sentence handed down by the Supreme Court for his role in an attempted coup following his 2022 election defeat. The appeal submitted on Monday challenges key aspects of the ruling and accuses the court of procedural flaws, including insufficient time for his legal team to prepare a defense. Bolsonaro's lawyer argued that the judgment contains ambiguities, omissions, and contradictions, and are seeking a review that could reduce or overturn the sentence. The conviction stems from a failed plot to prevent President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva from assuming office, which included plans to storm government buildings and allegedly assassinate top officials. The divisive trial has strained Brazil-US relations, with President Donald Trump denouncing the prosecution as a witch hunt. Bolsonaro, currently under house arrest due to health issues, remains a polarizing figure in Brazilian politics, and the outcome of his appeal could have far-reaching implications for the country's democratic institutions. In the meantime, Jamaica is bracing for catastrophic impact as Hurricane Melissa, a Category 5 storm, barrels towards the island with wind gusts exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. The World Meteorological Organization has warned that Melissa could be the worst storm to hit Jamaica in over a century, prompting Prime Minister Andrew Holness to order mass evacuations affecting up to 1.5 million residents. The storm is expected to bring torrential rainfall, flash floods, and storm surges up to 4 meters, with its eye projected to make landfall near St. Elizabeth and exit through St. Anne. Emergency services are on high alert, and international aid agencies are preparing for a large-scale humanitarian response. The Red Cross has already reported fatalities in Jamaica, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, with infrastructure damage mounting across the region. As Hurricane Melissa overtakes Hurricane Katrina in intensity, forecasters are urging residents to seek shelter immediately and remain indoors until the storm passes. Live coverage continues as the nation faces what experts are calling the storm of the century. Meanwhile, Venezuela has suspended a major natural gas agreement with Trinidad and Tobago following the arrival of a U.S. Navy warship in Port of Spain. President Nicolas Maduro ordered the immediate cancellation of the deal, accusing Trinidad's Prime Minister Kamla Cesar of turning the island nation into an aircraft carrier of the American empire against Venezuela. The USS Gravely, a guided missile destroyer, docked in Trinidad on October 27th for joint military exercises aimed at strengthening regional security. Venezuelan officials condemned the move as a hostile act and a threat to national sovereignty, citing concerns over U.S. military presence near its waters. The suspended energy accord was part of a broader regional cooperation plan to export Venezuelan gas to Trinidad for processing and distribution. Analysts warn that the diplomatic fallout could strain Caribbean energy partnerships and escalate tensions between Washington and Caracas amid ongoing geopolitical friction. You're still watching The World in 30 Minutes live on Politics and Business TV. Still to come, Afghanistan-Pakistan peace talks stall in Istanbul amid rising tensions. Stay with us. Welcome back. China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has signed an enhanced free trade agreement aimed at deepening regional economic ties and mitigating the impact of U.S. tariffs under President Donald Trump. The upgraded pact, formalized at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, expands the scope of the original 2010 framework to include digital economy, green development, and infrastructure cooperation. Chinese Premier Li Qiang and and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim witnessed the signing, which comes amid rising global trade tensions. Officials say the new agreement, dubbed the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0 Upgrade Protocol, will streamline custom procedures, boost cross-border investment, and reinforce supply chain resilience across Asia, with bilateral trade between China and ASEAN surpassing $770 billion last year. The pact is expected to accelerate regional integration and offer a buffer against protectionist policies. Analysts view the move as a strategic response to shifting global trade dynamics and a reaffirmation of China's commitment to multilateralism. In a landmark move, Bangladesh's Election Commission has granted voting access to over 15 million expatriates, including migrant workers across the Gulf, Europe, the Americas, and Southeast Asia, long excluded from the electoral process. These citizens will now be able to cast their ballots through a newly launched postal voting system supported by the app Postal Vote BD. The reform is part of broader efforts to strengthen democratic participation and rebuild trust in state institutions following political unrest that led to the ousting of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in 2024. Analysts say the inclusion of the diaspora, who represent more than 10% of the total electorate, could significantly reshape the outcome of Bangladesh's next general election. Many expatriates have strong views on governance, economic policy, and human rights, and their votes may tilt the balance in closely contested races. As the interim government pushes forward with electoral reforms, political parties are expected to ramp up outreach to the diaspora, recognizing their newfound influence in shaping the country's future. Efforts to broker a long-term peace between Afghanistan and Pakistan have hit a deadlock after 3 days of negotiations in Istanbul ended with a breakthrough. Despite both sides maintaining a fragile ceasefire along their volatile border, officials from Kabul and Islamabad traded blame for the impasse, accusing each other of lacking seriousness and failing to offer concrete guarantees. The talks, mediated by Turkey and Qatar, were prompted by a recent surge in deadly cross-border clashes, the worst since the Taliban returned to power in 2021. The stalled dialogue underscores deep-rooted mistrust over militant safe havens and border security, long-standing flashpoints in bilateral relations. While delegations remain in Turkey, it remains unclear whether a fourth round of talks will proceed. The United Nations and regional observers have urged both nations to resume dialogue and honor the ceasefire, warning that renewed hostilities could destabilize the broader region and derail humanitarian efforts. Back to Africa, the Sudanese army has officially withdrawn from Al-Fasher, its last remaining stronghold in the Darfur region, following a major offensive by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces (RSF). Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan announced the retreat late Monday, citing the need to prevent further civilian casualties after RSF forces captured the city's main military base. The withdrawal leaves more than 250,000 civilians, half of them children, under RSF control, raising fears of a humanitarian catastrophe. The United Nations has issued a stark warning about the growing risk of mass atrocities in Al-Fasher. According to the UN Human Rights Office, there are credible reports of summary executions, ethically motivated killings, and violations of humanitarian law by RSF fighters. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk described the situation as deteriorating by the day, urging immediate international action to protect civilians and ensure accountability for war crimes. Supporters of Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara have taken to the streets in celebration following his sweeping victory in the country's presidential election. According to provisional results released by the Independent Electoral Commission, Ouattara secured nearly 90% of the vote, extending his leadership into a fourth term. The announcement sparked jubilant scenes in Abidjan and other major cities, with ruling party loyalists waving flags, dancing and chanting in support of the 83-year-old leader. While the outcome was widely anticipated, critics have raised concern over the exclusion of key opposition figures from the race. Nonetheless, Ouattara's backers hailed the result as a mandate for continued stability and economic progress in the world's top cocoa-producing nation. The president is expected to address the nation later this week, outlining his agenda for the new term and reaffirming his commitment to development and unity. Mali jails former Prime Minister Moussa Mara over social media posts supporting political prisoners. A court in Mali has sentenced former Prime Minister Moussa Mara to 1 year in prison for social media posts expressing solidarity with political prisoners, a move that critics say reflects the ruling junta's growing intolerance of dissent. Mara, who served as a Prime Minister from 2014 to 2015, was convicted of undermining the credibility of the state and opposing legitimate authority by the National Cybercrime Center Court in Bamako. In addition to the prison term, he received a 1-year suspended sentence and a fine of 500,000 CFA francs, approximately $887. The charges stem from a July post in which Mara mentioned visiting political prisoners and pledged to seek justice on their behalf. He has been in custody since August 4th, and the verdict has sparked concern among human rights advocates who view it as part of a broader crackdown on free expression under military ruler Colonel Assimi Goïta. Mara reportedly listened impassively as the sentence was read, while supporters warned the case sets a dangerous precedent for political discourse in Mali. And that wraps up the program. But before we go, the headlines again. Israeli drones and shelling stir deep trauma in Gaza despite ceasefire. Trump and Japan's Takaichi signed landmark deal to secure rare earth supply chains. And Hurricane Melissa threatens Jamaica as storm of the century nears landfall. Jubilant crowds celebrate Ouattara's landslide re-election in Ivory Coast. For more updates and in-depth analysis, follow Politics and Business TV.English on YouTube and Facebook. Connect with us on Instagram at PMBTV_English and TikTok at PMBTV_ENG. Remember to subscribe and stay informed. From me, Fatima Abubakar Oibo, to have a lovely day. Bye for now.